where he met with Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. This meeting comes at a critical juncture, with both countries facing increasing concerns about regional security and China's growing assertiveness in the South China Sea. Their talks focused on boosting security cooperation, sharing intelligence, and negotiating two new defense pacts. The proposed agreement would support Japanese troops during joint training missions in the Philippines, and both leaders strongly opposed any attempts to alter the status quo in the East and South China Seas by forcing. Here's what the Japanese Prime Minister and the President of the Philippines had to say.
つきましては、近年、重層的に協力の進化が進められてきておりますが、ACSA物品役務相互提供協定について交渉を開始をするということで一致をいたしました。将来的な情報保護協定の締結に向け、政府間で議論を開始することを確認をいたしました。アメリカを含めました日本、アメリカ、フィリピン協力の重要性についても確認をいたしたところであります。
On defense and security cooperation, it is of note that the Philippines is the first recipient of Japan's official security assistance. And even as a new initiative, barely 3 years old, the OSA has allowed our security agencies, especially the Department of National Defense, to achieve meaningful upgrades.
And in another development, the Philippines accused China of creating disturbances in the South China Sea as in the region. The Philippines said that Beijing's actions infringe on its sovereignty and threaten regional peace. Meanwhile, over 14,000 Filipino and US troops are holding joint drills, which China has condemned as provocative. The Philippines maintains that these exercises are necessary for preparedness, not provocation. Meanwhile, the Philippines and New Zealand signed a troop agreement strengthening their defense ties and paving the way for increased military cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. All right, joining us on the show to talk more about this is Don McLean-Gill, geopolitical analyst. Don, appreciate you being here. Well, this is no surprise that the Philippines and Japan are gearing up to, respond to the Chinese aggression, which has been prevalent for quite some time. In fact, even the ASEAN countries, for the better part of the last 5 years, have been trying to tell the world that these exercises that China has been conducting and this land grabbing also that China has been taking part in is against international law.
Thank you very much, Vineet. It's a true pleasure to speak to you again. Now, for the Philippines, while we have our traditional alliance, treaty alliance with the US, Japan has established its place as another very important security partner, be it geographically, as both the Philippines and Japan are strategically situated in the first island chain. When it comes to capacity building, Japan is one of the most important partners in building up the modernization program of the Philippine Coast Guard, and of course the OSA, and of course shared interests in pushing back against China's expansionism. So Prime Minister Ishiba's visit coincides with significant milestones in what President Marcos Jr. describes as a golden age of bilateral relations. So this includes the reciprocal access agreement and Japan's full participation in this year's annual Balikatan exercises for the first time, indicating a shared willingness to enhance joint preparedness and interoperability, and of course, doing it bilaterally and multilaterally as well, amid growing uncertainties. And as a demonstration of this continuous commitment in operationalizing the RAA, and of course, the broader security partnership, there have been negotiations, as you have mentioned earlier, regarding the possible ACSA, which would facilitate the RAA by improving coordination for refueling and the provision of food for Japanese troops, and of course, another GSOMIA between Japan and the Philippines. So there was already a GSOMIA between Japan and the US in 2007, and one between the Philippines and the US last year. This would improve intelligence sharing and coordination. So no matter how much you have, as far as military assets are concerned, what would eventually matter would be whether you have the right and needed intelligence for facilitating and maximizing such operations. And I think that this is the direction, a multifaceted partnership that is proactive enough to adapt based on the emerging realities.
Don, appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much for those perspectives. Well, that's all we have time for now. We will continue.